I thought the waiting meant you forgot me. I thought silence was your final answer. That closed doors were your way of saying I wasn't worthy. That empty prayers rising into empty skies were just echoes of a faith that once was, but would never be again. I had been waiting so long, God, so long that I forgot what hope felt like. So long that my prayers became whispers, and my whispers became sighs, and my sighs became nothing at all. Just breath, just existence, just the hollow rhythm of days passing into nights, and nights bleeding into mornings that felt too bright for a soul this tired. I prayed for healing, and the pain stayed. I prayed for breakthrough, and the walls held. I prayed for direction, and the path remained hidden beneath fog so thick I couldn't see my own hands reaching out into the dark. And somewhere in all that reaching, all that pleading, all that desperate begging for just one sign that you were listening, I broke. Not all at once. Breaking never happens all at once, does it? It's gradual, like water wearing down stone, like light fading at dusk. You don't notice it until you're standing in the dark, wondering when the sun disappeared. I broke in the quiet moments, when I watched others receive what I had been praying for, when I saw doors open for them that had been slammed in my face, when I heard testimonies of answered prayers and felt nothing but the ache of my own unanswered ones. I broke in the middle of worship songs that promised you were near, while I felt so utterly alone. In the middle of sermons about waiting with joy, when all I had left was exhaustion. In the middle of verses about trusting your timing, when your timing felt like abandonment, I almost gave up. God, I almost walked away from this faith that had been my foundation, because the foundation felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. I almost decided that maybe you were real for other people, but not for me. Maybe you answered other prayers, but not mine. Maybe you moved in other lives, but not in this one. I almost believed that the waiting was punishment, that I had done something wrong, said something wrong, believed something wrong, and this endless season of silence was my consequence. I searched my heart for hidden sin. I confessed things I wasn't even sure I had done. I begged for forgiveness for sins I couldn't name, hoping that somewhere in all that repentance, you would finally answer. But you didn't. Not in the way I expected, not in the timeline I demanded, not in the loud, miraculous, unmistakable way I thought I needed. And so I kept waiting, even when I didn't want to, even when faith felt like a weight instead of wings, even when prayer felt like shouting into a void that swallowed every word. I waited because I didn't know what else to do. The waiting stripped me, layer by layer. It peeled away everything I thought made me strong. It took my confidence first, that bold assurance that I could pray in faith and see mountains move. Then it took my expectations, all those carefully constructed plans of how my life should unfold, when my prayers should be answered, what my breakthrough should look like. It took my control. Oh, how I had tried to control it all, tried to orchestrate my own deliverance, tried to force open doors that you had closed, tried to make things happen in my own strength, my own timing, my own way. The waiting taught me that my hands were never strong enough to hold what only yours could carry. It took my pride. That subtle pride that whispered I deserved an answer because I had prayed enough, sacrificed enough, believed enough. The waiting humbled me until I understood that I deserved nothing, and yet you were giving me everything, just not in the package I expected. Night after night I cried, not the dramatic tears of a moment, but the quiet, aching tears of a soul that has been heavy for so long it forgot what lightness felt like. Tears that fell into pillows no one else saw. Tears that mixed with whispered prayers that felt like they went nowhere. Morning after morning, I woke up to numbness. That strange emptiness that comes when you've felt too much for too long. When your heart is so tired of hurting that it just stops hoping, stops dreaming, stops expecting anything to change. I went through the motions. I showed up. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I said I was fine when people asked. I praised you in public while questioning you in private. I sang songs about your faithfulness while wondering if you had forgotten my name. But even there, even in that barren place, even in that season that felt like death, something was happening. Something I couldn't see, something I couldn't feel, something so deep and so quiet that I almost missed it. Roots were growing, in the darkness of the soil, where no light reaches, where no one sees, where nothing seems to be happening at all. Roots were spreading, digging deeper, reaching further, anchoring down into a foundation stronger than anything I could have built in the sunshine. The waiting wasn't wasting me, it was rooting me. The silence wasn't rejection, it was sacred space for something new to form. The closed doors weren't punishment, they were protection from paths that would have destroyed what you were building in me. But I didn't know that then. All I knew was the ache. All I felt was the absence. All I saw was the emptiness where I thought your answer should be. I was breaking. Slowly. Quietly. Completely. And maybe that was the point. Maybe breaking was the only way you could plant me deep enough to withstand what was coming. Maybe the crumbling of everything I had built was necessary for you to build something eternal. Maybe the stripping away of my strength was the only way I could discover yours. I didn't understand it. I didn't like it. But somewhere in the breaking, somewhere in the waiting, somewhere in the silence that felt like forever, you were working. You were writing a story I couldn't read yet, painting a picture I couldn't see, composing a symphony I couldn't hear. And every moment of waiting, every tear that fell, every prayer that seemed to go unanswered, was a brushstroke, a note, a word in a narrative that would one day make sense. But not yet. Not in that season. In that season, all I had was the waiting, and the waiting was breaking me. Until one morning, one ordinary, unremarkable, quiet morning when the sun rose the same way it had risen 1,000 times before, when the world woke up to its routines and rhythms, when nothing looked different, nothing felt different, nothing had changed in the circumstances that had held me captive for so long, but something shifted. Not in the world, in me. I woke up, and instead of the numbness, instead of the heaviness, instead of the exhaustion that had become my constant companion, I felt something else. Something so gentle I almost dismissed it. Something so quiet I almost talked over it. Something so unexpected I almost didn't trust it. Peace. Not the peace that comes when problems are solved. Not the peace that arrives with answered prayers and open doors and visible breakthrough. But a deeper peace, a peace that made no logical sense. A peace that settled into the spaces where anxiety had lived. A peace that whispered into the silence I had grown to fear. I sat there in the early morning light filtering through my window, and I prayed. Not the desperate prayers I'd been praying. Not the pleading, begging, demanding prayers that had exhausted me. Just presence. Just quiet. Just me and you, and the stillness between us. And in that stillness, I heard it. Not audibly, not in thunder or trumpets or the dramatic way I had always imagined your voice would sound, but in a whisper so soft, so tender, so intimate that it could only be you. It's not over. 3 words, just 3 words, but they landed in my spirit like rain on drought-cracked ground, like light in a dark room, like breath in lungs that had forgotten how to fill. It's not over. The tears came then, not the tears of exhaustion, but tears of something breaking open inside me. Something that had been locked and sealed and protected behind walls I didn't even know I had built. The tears kept coming, and I let them. I let them wash over the disappointment, the bitterness, the questions, the anger I had been too afraid to admit I felt. And you kept whispering, "It's not over. It's just beginning." Beginning. How could this be beginning? This season that had felt like an ending. This waiting that had felt like a funeral for dreams that died. This silence that had felt like abandonment. How could any of this be a beginning? But the whisper persisted. Gentle. Patient. Sure. What you thought was ending was only the old falling away. What you thought was death was only the seed breaking open to birth something new. What you thought was my silence was me making space for a deeper conversation. What you thought was me forgetting you was me preparing you for what you've been praying for. And so much more. I sat there, and the weight that had pressed on my chest for months, for years, began to lift. Not all at once. Weights that have been carried that long don't disappear instantly. But I felt it lighten. I felt room to breathe. I felt the first stirrings of something I had almost given up on. Hope. Real hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope that demands and controls, but the quiet, steady hope that trusts even when it can't see. The hope that says, maybe, just maybe, you were here all along. Maybe the waiting wasn't wasted. Maybe the breaking was necessary. Maybe what I thought was the end of my story was actually the most important chapter. I began to thank you then, through tears that wouldn't stop. I thanked you, not for the answers I didn't have yet, not for the breakthroughs that hadn't manifested, not for the healing that was still in process, but for being there, for staying, for not leaving even when I accused you of abandonment, for holding me even when I couldn't feel your hands, for speaking even when I thought you were silent. I thanked you for the waiting. Those words felt strange on my lips, thanking you for the very thing that had broken me. But as I said them, I understood. The waiting had been hard. Yes, it had stripped me. Yes, it had brought me to my knees. Yes, but it had also done something beautiful that I couldn't have received any other way. It had taught me that your timing isn't late. It's perfect. That your silence isn't absence. It's intimacy. That your delays aren't denials. They're divine appointments with a version of myself I hadn't met yet. A stronger version. A deeper version. A version that could carry what I'd been asking for without it destroying me. I had been praying for breakthrough, but what I really needed was transformation. I had been praying for open doors, but what I really needed was a new perspective. I had been praying for answers, but what I really needed was to learn how to trust the one who holds all the answers. The waiting had been the womb, dark, uncomfortable, confining, but necessary for the birth of something that couldn't come any other way. You were forming me in that hidden place, shaping me, preparing me, getting me ready for a purpose I hadn't fully understood yet. Every closed door was protecting me from paths that looked good, but would have led me away from your best. Every delayed answer was allowing time for circumstances to align in ways I couldn't orchestrate. Every moment of silence was giving me space to hear your voice more clearly than I ever could in the noise of my demands. And now, in this quiet morning, in this sacred whisper, I was finally ready to receive it. It's just beginning. The story I thought was ending. The dream I thought had died. The promise I thought you had forgotten. The healing I thought would never come. The breakthrough I thought had passed me by. The direction I thought I'd lost forever. It wasn't over. It was beginning. Beginning in a way that honored the waiting. In a way that made sense of the tears. In a way that redeemed every moment I thought was wasted. You waste nothing, God. Nothing. Not a single tear. Not a single prayer. Not a single moment of waiting. You were collecting them all, storing them up, preparing to pour them back out as blessing that would overflow. I could feel it now. The shift. not just in my spirit, but in the atmosphere around me, like the air before dawn, like the hush before a symphony begins, like the pause before a masterpiece is revealed. Something was coming, something I had waited for, something worth every moment of the wait. And I was ready now. I couldn't have been ready before. Before, I would have grabbed the blessing and run. I would have held it with clenched fists and possessive hands. I would have made an idol of the gift and forgotten the giver. But the waiting had taught me to hold things loosely, to receive with open hands, to steward with gratitude, to recognize that every good gift comes from you, and it's not truly mine. It's yours, entrusted to me for your purposes. Before, I would have taken the healing and forgotten the healer, taken the breakthrough and forgotten the one who breaks chains, taken the open door and forgotten the one who holds the keys. But the waiting had taught me that you are the prize, you are the answer, you are the breakthrough, and anything else you give is just overflow of your goodness, not the source of it. The waiting had broken my dependence on outcomes and built my dependence on you. It had shattered my need for immediate answers and taught me to trust in your perfect timing. It had crushed my illusion of control and established me in surrender. And surrender, I was learning, wasn't defeat. Surrender was the position where miracles happened, where your power could flow, where your will could be done. Surrender was the soil where faith grew deep enough to weather any storm. I looked back over the months, the years of waiting, and I could see it now. Your fingerprints all over it. The moments when provision came just in time. The relationships that held me when I couldn't hold myself. The scripture that spoke directly to my situation in the exact moment I needed it. The songs that ministered to my spirit when I had no words left. The sunrise after the longest night. The peace in the middle of chaos. The strength when I thought I had none left. You were there. All along, you were there. Not fixing everything instantly the way I wanted. Not removing every obstacle. Not making it easy. But walking with me. Carrying me when I couldn't walk. Holding me when I fell apart. Whispering promises into my darkness. Breathing life into my dying dreams. Refusing to let me go even when I tried to walk away. You were there, and you were working. Working in ways I couldn't see. Working at depths I couldn't comprehend. Working with a wisdom that far exceeded my limited understanding. Working all things together for good, even when nothing looked good. And now, as the light filled my room, as your whisper echoed in my spirit, as peace settled where pain had been, I understood. The waiting broke me, so the whisper could rebuild me. The old version of me had to die, so the new version could be born. The dreams I had constructed in my own understanding had to crumble so you could build dreams that aligned with your divine purpose. The plans I had made had to fall apart, so your plans could come together. I had been fighting the breaking, not realizing it was the birthing. I had been resisting the pruning, not understanding it was preparing me for greater fruitfulness. I had been questioning your love in the delay, not recognizing that the delay was the most loving thing you could do. Because if you had given me what I wanted when I wanted it, I would have been crushed by the weight of it. If you had opened doors before I was ready, I would have walked through them into disaster. If you had answered prayers on my timeline, I would have missed the greater thing you were preparing on yours. You loved me too much to give me what I demanded before I was ready to receive it. You loved me too much to let me stay in the shallow places when you were calling me to deeper waters. You loved me too much to leave me unchanged when transformation was the very thing my soul needed most. The waiting had been love, hard love, refining love. Love that hurt in the moment but would heal for a lifetime. Love that required faith when nothing made sense. Love that asked me to trust you when every visible circumstance said I shouldn't. And I had learned to trust you. Not perfectly, not without questions, not without moments of doubt and fear, but deeply, truly. in a way that could only come from walking through fire and finding you in the flames, in a way that could only come from sinking into deep waters and discovering you were the solid ground beneath, in a way that could only come from facing the darkest night and watching you become my light. This was the beginning you were whispering about, not just the beginning of answered prayers, though those were coming, not just the beginning of breakthrough, though breakthrough was on the horizon, but the beginning of a deeper walk with you, a more intimate relationship, a stronger faith, a wiser heart, a soul that knew you not just as the God who gives good gifts, but as the God who is the good gift. You were the answer I had been seeking all along, not the things I was asking for, though you cared about those too, not the circumstances I was desperate to change, though you were already working on those, but you, knowing you, really knowing you, not knowing about you, but knowing you in the deep places where theology becomes experience and doctrine becomes relationship. The waiting had brought me here, to this place where I could finally hear your voice without the noise of my demands drowning it out, to this place where I could finally see your face without my expectations blocking the view, to this place where I could finally rest in your presence without the restlessness of trying to make things happen in my own strength. And from this place, everything could begin. The healing I had prayed for could now come, and I would recognize it as your hand, not luck or coincidence. The breakthrough I had begged for could now manifest, and I would steward it with wisdom instead of entitlement. The direction I had sought could now be revealed, and I would follow it with obedience instead of trying to redirect it to my preferences. From this place of surrender, of trust, of deep knowing that you are good even when life isn't, even when prayers seem unanswered, even when the waiting feels endless. From this place, miracles could happen, not because I had earned them, not because I had waited long enough, but because I was finally positioned to receive them without them destroying me. The waiting had been preparation, and preparation is never wasted, even when it's painful, especially when it's painful, because the greater the purpose, the deeper the preparation required. You were preparing me for something bigger than my small prayers, something more beautiful than my limited vision, something eternal that would outlast my temporary circumstances. And that something was beginning now. I could feel it in the air, in the sunrise that seemed brighter somehow, in the hope that was stirring after a long winter, in the anticipation that whispered of good things coming. Not because my circumstances had changed yet, but because I had changed. The most important shift had already happened inside me. I was no longer the woman who demanded answers on her timeline. I was becoming the woman who trusted your timing. I was no longer the woman who broke under pressure. I was becoming the woman who knew how to bend with grace. I was no longer the woman who measured your love by her circumstances. I was becoming the woman who knew your love was constant regardless of what was happening around her. This was the beginning, the real beginning, the kind that came after endings, the kind that was built on a foundation of tested faith, the kind that would last because it wasn't dependent on perfect circumstances, but on a perfect God. And so I sat there in the quiet of that morning, and I whispered back to you, I'm ready, ready to see what you had been preparing, ready to walk through the doors you were about to open, ready to receive the breakthrough that was coming, ready to step into the purpose you had been shaping me for, ready to live the story you had been writing, even through the chapters that felt like tragedy, because I understood now that there were no wasted chapters, no throwaway scenes, no meaningless moments. Everything mattered. Everything had purpose, even the waiting, especially the waiting. I was ready to testify that you are faithful, even when I couldn't see your faithfulness, that you are good, even when life isn't good, that you never left, even when I felt alone, that you were answering, even in the silence, that you were moving, even when everything looked still. I was ready to tell anyone who would listen that the waiting seasons are sacred, that the breaking seasons are holy, that the seasons when nothing makes sense are often the seasons when the most important transformations are happening. That God's delays are not denials, and His silence is not absence, and His timing is always perfect. I was ready to encourage the weary ones who are still waiting, still praying, still holding on by a thread, to tell them not to give up, not to let go, not to walk away, because what looks like an ending might be the most beautiful beginning they've ever experienced, because the breakthrough they're praying for might be one whisper away, because God hasn't forgotten, He's just preparing them for something they can't imagine yet. I was ready to live differently, to pray differently, to trust differently, to love differently, to worship differently, because I had learned through the fire that you are worth trusting, even when I can't trace your hand, that you are worth worshipping, even when I don't understand your ways, that you are worth following, even when the path is unclear. The waiting broke me, but the whisper rebuilt me stronger, rebuilt me deeper, rebuilt me with a foundation that couldn't be shaken because it was built on the rock, rebuilt me with a faith that had been tested and refined and proven genuine, rebuilt me with a hope that was anchored in eternity, not in temporary circumstances. And now, with tears of gratitude streaming down my face, with a heart full of worship, with a spirit finally at peace, I could say what I couldn't say in the middle of the waiting. Thank you. Thank you for not answering my prayers on my timeline, because your timeline was so much better. Thank you for closing doors I wanted to walk through, because you were protecting me from paths that would have harmed me. Thank you for the silence that taught me to listen more carefully. Thank you for the waiting that taught me to trust more deeply. Thank you for the breaking that taught me to surrender more completely. Thank you for loving me enough to not give me what I thought I needed, and instead giving me what my soul truly needed. Thank you for seeing beyond my immediate requests to my eternal purpose. Thank you for caring more about my character than my comfort. Thank you for prioritizing my transformation over my convenience. Thank you for staying when I doubted, for holding me when I fell apart, for speaking when I couldn't hear, for working when I couldn't see, for never, ever giving up on me, even when I almost gave up on you. Thank you for this new beginning, this sacred start, this holy opportunity to walk into everything you've been preparing, carrying everything I learned in the waiting. Thank you that nothing was wasted. No tear, no prayer, no moment of faith when nothing made sense. You collected it all, treasured it all, and now you're ready to pour it back out as blessing. I was waiting for you to move, God, but you were waiting for me to trust. And now I do. Now I trust. Not perfectly, not without questions, but deeply and truly. I trust that you are good. I trust that you are faithful. I trust that you are working all things together for my good and your glory. I trust that what you've begun, you will complete. I trust that the best is still ahead, not behind. I trust that this isn't over. It's just beginning.